afternoon, everyone. My name is Sha-Kiya Gatson, and I am the host of the ListNing Project. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Mr. Courtney Edwards. How are you today, sir?
Great. How you doing, sis?
I'm doing well.
Yes, ma'am.
Well. So I usually like to start off with asking, what have you heard about the ListNing Project?
I've had I've heard a lot of great things for sure. Like this open, honest, transparent conversation. Conversation is based on looking at things through a lens of like for men, right? And transparency and I think I said that before, but just really get into trying to get us to come forward.
Absolutely.
And share because I know sometimes we choose to kind of stay silent or speak less on certain things. You know, that's what I understand, what I've seen in at the opportunity.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you came. We have I guess, the unique perspective of having a lot of history between us. So I think the conversation can go a little bit deeper, and I can ask more pointed questions to you and get some questions to some things that I really would like to know that I know that you yourself would be able to answer. Here, I like to not delve into names, but more so the experience in itself and how you as a man see it or how you take those scenarios or situations. Agree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So let's start off with tell me about yourself, how you grew up, what was your upbringing like, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so born and raised Dallas, Texas. Grew up in South Oak Cliff. My mom and dad were together. They split up, got divorced, remarried, and then my dad moved us. You know, we moved to a different area in Dallas. You know, after I graduated, I went straight to the Air Force. Right, that's not what I originally wanted to do.
Okay.
What I wanted to do was I wanted to go to but kind of had some issues at home with my dad, and their relationship issues spilled over
Gotcha.
to after graduation. I got into some trouble with law enforcement and had some issues. So I went to the Air Force. Air Force, 10 years, multiple deployments. I started in IT and been doing that since. So you're looking at probably 26 or so years of technology work as my profession. And then, got out, went to corporate America, settled in, of course, had my kids.
How many children do you have?
4 total.
Okay.
4 total. Oldest is 28, 29, 26. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's crazy.
That number just
Jumps, yeah.
Okay, continue.
26, then 19, born on 20, and baby girl's 11. So 3 boys, 1 girl.
Okay.
So yeah, that so after the military, went into corporate, settled down, and started looking at things a little different in corporate. Because once you play that game, you start climbing the corporate ladder, you start understanding it's never going to be yours.
Right.
Right. So that's when I started. Really, I've always been ambitious about business. I've always had a different perspective. Even growing up in the hood, growing up around, the surroundings and things like that, and seeing a lot. Same thing. Every hood is almost the same, almost, right?
Mhm.
Seeing all that, but I've always had a curiosity for what's more. Like what's more. I've always been like drawn to more.
Gotcha.
So I bring that up because that played a part in starting, real estate businesses and investing and doing like that. So that's doing things like that. That's where we are right now. That's me in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. So let's take it back a little bit and we talk about teenage years or young adult years. How would you say you looked at the world in terms of who you were going to be, what your aspirations were? Like, how did that look for you being a young Black man?
Teenage years going into adulthood. I was very ambitious. I wanted a lot. It wasn't money. It's hard to put a finger on it, but I wanted a lot. I wanted more information. That's why I think that's for me. I wanted more information. Like I give you an example. I always had the feeling there has to be more out there.
More than what?
More than what I grew up seeing. Like as a teenager, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so when I told you I got in trouble, right? And I basically needed to make some fast decisions to get away from my surroundings, or I was probably going to end up in jail. More than
understand completely.
When things started happening, it was like this can't be it. Because I got other family members that are in prison, and I don't want to be there. I never wanted them. So going back to your question, I wanted more. That kind of always level set brought me back to more as a teenager. You know what I mean? And that kept me out of a lot of situations, right? My ambition for more information, right? And then teenage into adulthood, to answer your question, going into adulthood, same thing, ambitious, but it started, that turned into, how do I get there? Better yet, no, I got a better yet. I got a better one for you. Transitioning from that late teen into adulthood as a young black man, it was more about, I feel like I wasn't on the right trajectory to meet what I envisioned for myself.
Okay. And was that because you were in the military?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that the military was definitely part of it because, again, you grow up seeing violence, even in your family, your friend, your circle, and you see all that, right? And you like, all right, I'm out the hood. I'm in the military, doing my thing. You get every first and 15th. It's clocked, right? Everything's on schedule. But I start feeling complacent.
Okay.
I felt, because again, the North Star where I was aiming toward was, I want more. And I felt like the military wasn't going to give me that vehicle. So that's why I got out.
So I respect that. And I feel like there are a lot of people that um, they go into the military and they don't really have an end goal. And so they stay until basically their time runs out.
Yeah.
And then there are other people that go in and they do their certain amount of time, and when it's not right for them, that becomes a problem, especially for their family members that don't necessarily understand the why behind it.
Yeah.
So I understand that you knowing that this was not on the path that you wanted it to. How did that affect your family? Seeing like, okay, well, I'm here and I've done this certain amount of time. How did they support that decision or not support that decision to get out?
You said family, like parents or wife at the time?
Everybody. How do they feel about it? Because at that time, the military is your stability.
Right.
You are no longer anybody's responsibility.
Right.
How does that?
It was, so at that time, when I was getting out, my first marriage was pretty much on the decline. So it was just about done for the most part. So I didn't have that kind of pressure on me. It was two things. First thing was, I needed to get stable for my kids, right? Because my ex she was doing retirement, right? That we're talking about, right? That was her thing. She already crossed a certain amount of years, so she was going to retire regardless. My thing was, I wanted to get stable for my boys. So that meant, okay, moving back to Dallas, employment, housing, and all that thing, right? And on top of that, positioning myself so I can get them on schedule every summer, holiday, et cetera, right?
Got you.
So that's what I felt.
Okay.
I felt the need to get stable fast.
So the reset for you was to go back to where you started from.
Yes.
Okay.
I like where this is going. Yeah.
How do you explain that reset to your children?
That was a very, very nuanced conversation that took years.
Really?
Took years to explain that. So this is, I'll try my best to package it up, right, with the time that we have. So when I left, there was an event that happened. I sat down on the sofa with the boys, and I sat each one of them down, and I told them, Daddy's gotta leave. I'm not leaving because I want to leave you. I'm leaving because Daddy has to put himself in a better situation to support you and be the best dad that I can be, so that you can see me for who I need to be, right? Okay, so let's pin that. When I got to Dallas and everything unfolded the way it did, my middle son had a lot of built up frustration with me for leaving. A lot. And that's why I say it was nuanced, and it took years, because for years and years he never said nothing. Okay. Because he would still come every summer. We still had time, right? But what was happening was, I was missing a lot of events at school. I was missing, parent teacher night. I was missing the wrestling meets. I was missing events. Exactly. And even though I was still financially providing, I was still calling, like all that stuff was there, but I wasn't there.
it impacted that relationship.
It just added a lot of layers on top of something that was already difficult.
Right.
Right. All right. Going into adulthood with that son that had those issues up until about 3 years ago, we finally unpacked all of that. Which what happened was I ended up owning it. Of course, I owned it from day one, but I ended up telling him enough is enough.
Okay.
Right? Like I can only apologize.
But so much.
For so much because I wasn't negligent. Like I wasn't being out just wilding. No, I accomplished what I set out to do. I was gone and I missed that time and it hurt. It hurt me, but I can't get that back. And I can't be our relationship going forward
can't be based on that.
You can't hold it over my head because number one, I'm not gonna let you.
Okay.
Right. As a man, I'm not gonna let you hold that over my head because I've owned it. I've apologized for it, and there's multiple players in that scenario, right? Mm-hmm. So, and he finally got it, and he forgave me. Mm-hmm. He forgave me, but it took years. It took years.
So, in doing all of that and leaving and having time for yourself to kind of reset the way that you did, do you think that there was anything that their mom could have done to ease that up or make that an easier transition for the boys and you to kind of minimize the impact to the relationship?
I think I think so, but I think there's things that could have been done from both of us, but I don't know if we were equipped mentally and maturity wise to do that for each other as parents.
Gotcha.
Because now, she always tell the boys how great of a father, how great of a man I am and have become, right? How proud of me she is, right? As a father and as a person. She just nothing but great things to say, right? Well, back then, she never would put me down to them, but she wouldn't, the communication wasn't there. It wasn't like, okay, now I'll give you an example. Hey, if one of the grades is slipping, it's like, hey, let's partner on this. Let's work through this together, right? Those kind of things would have made that transition easier. But at that time, it was like, I got to get you back. Mm-hmm. And then on my part, it was anything could trigger, and I automatically go to a defense mechanism. Okay. Automatic. So
help me understand that. Like, is it because I see a lot of men that have high emotions and in emotional spaces where they should have high emotions, but instead of saying that they're in high emotions, they counter with defense or frustration or anger. Why is it so hard to express that emotion?
I don't think it's hard to express that emotion. We're wired different.
Okay.
Men are just, some men, not all, most men will express and say what we need to say, but we're just wired different. We process, typically logic is 70% of our expression. So we go after the logic of the situation first, and then the feeling, or then what happened. You see what I'm saying? So if you stack it, out of 100%, 70% most of the time is logic, and then what's going on, and then, how do it make you feel or me feel, whatever. That's kind of wrapped up in that 30%. But most of the time, 67% is logic. I say that because we try not to react shotgun, right? Mm-hmm. We try not to just off the cuff because you're thinking, okay, who the players in this situation? What did I do? What did she do? Or whatever, whatever's going on. And you try to listen for, okay, what's the root of all of this? And then you start thinking about what actions is going to come out of it? How do I resolve it? Can I resolve it? Mm-hmm. Those are the things. So when you said, okay, well, why don't y'all spread? Because in the back of your mind, you really trying to listen for what's going on.
So do you feel like men are, it's something that you hear a lot, especially like in social media or different conversations, that men are equipped to maybe dish out certain behaviors, but are not equipped necessarily to handle those same behaviors when you give it to them? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a fair statement. I think, yeah, I think that's a fair statement. There's certain situations where there's double standards, where we can dish certain things out or say certain things. But again, as humans, we don't have the benefit of seeing the end before it happens, right? So I say that because we're always present. We're always in the now, right now.
No.
So you can only do what you're equipped for right now. So if you knew, let's say that, there's an exchange. If you knew that if I say this, he or she is going to feel a certain way, I shouldn't say that. If you knew that in advance, you wouldn't say it. But because we're human and we're in the present, based on your maturity, based on your character makeup, all of that, right? You're gonna react where you are right now in the present. That's the advantage we have over raising kids. You've experienced more. You're forward of them a little bit. You feel me?
Okay.
That's how I see it. So I say that because I try not to. That's not to pass on accountability, but it's to keep that human element in place. That we're all human.
So do you think that because you started off in such grown-up spaces at such a young age,
Yeah.
were you actually prepared for those spaces, or were you in a state of imposter syndrome for a moment?
That's a tough question. That's a tough.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's tough. That one got me. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit for me because I want to make sure I understand. Like,
Okay.
yeah,
So, like, my belief is that people, when they go into the military, especially at the ages that we went into the military, we age light years
Yes.
ahead of our peers.
Yes.
We are doing things that, in my opinion, if you on the outside, people will look at you crazy for wanting to sign on to take on families
Yes.
and raise children and do all of these things. But we do it because we age so quickly in the level of responsibility that we're given. And so I'm curious as to whether you being a parent, you being a spouse, once you actually signed on to be in those things, was it a level of I am truly ready for these things, or was there a level of imposter syndrome? Like once you got into it, like, oh shoot, like this is not what I thought this was going to be, and I'm not really prepared for all of this.
Yeah, great. That's a great question. I think it was a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think it was a little bit of both. I felt that. So when I got in, of course, being married young, kids in a family young, air quote, that military framework. I felt pressure. I felt like I needed to deliver, but I also felt equipped to do it.
Okay. Where did that come from?
Well, no. I can't give them too much credit. My dad, my parents. Again, I come from a two-parent home for the most part, so I saw a family structure. So that's what I knew. Most people that come from, even if it's you don't have two parents, if you come from even if you have your aunts and uncles and your tribe, right? You see that and you want to replicate that. So that's what I did.
Okay.
Right. So that gave me the courage to kind of jump and say, okay, I can have a family. Knowing damn well at 19 years old, 20 years old.
It's a lot.
That's crazy. Like I look at my son.
It sounds nuts when you look at your children now and you're like, oh,
no way,
almost 30, and you're still not ready.
That's what I'm saying. And I think I attribute that to the military. That's what I was saying, like that framework, the ages. But it works. Because you are legally an adult, but again, that human element, even though you're 19, 20, 25, and you think in the Air Force or the military, you're grown and mature, you're not. You're just in this
space. You just got a lot more responsibility.
Yeah. And it's not normal. It's not.
Okay. And I listen, I agree with you. As somebody that got married super young, I was like, wow. When you think about it later on, you're like, this is not right.
Right.
Like nobody should have signed off on this. You know how you get up and be like, does anybody disapprove? Everybody should be like, hey, no, you guys need to wait and do this.
Yeah, what's crazy? That's something that I am doing different with my kids than my parents did. I'm shooting straight. I'll tell them like, hey, you can do this if you want, right? But understand here's the cost of it. Here's what it looked like on the backside. You're giving up a lot of your time. You have to sacrifice what you want to do. So you can't take on these responsibilities with another person and then still talk I.
Right.
That's gone. It's either we or them. That I really becomes secondary to push down, you know what I mean? And priority. So I shoot it straight. I don't tell them I'm not one of those parents that say, okay, this fairy tale of biblically, yes, it is the right thing to do it, depending on your faith and your religion, cool. But I'm keeping it straight. I don't recommend it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good deal. Do you feel like because you started off so early and you've been in this space of taking care of people for so long, do you ever feel the need to be selfish because you haven't, when everybody else would have been, not saying that you didn't enjoy yourself or you know your young adult years, but is there a point in your life where it's like, you know what, I need to be selfish and just really do the things that I enjoy, or find out what that looks like, considering you've been doing the we in some stage for most of your adult life?
Yeah, no, mine was in reverse. That's what caused me a lot of issues in my first relationship. That's where a lot of the issues was. Because I was still doing me and I.
Gotcha.
So I'm play ball, gaming, hanging out, instead of being at home, instead of helping with the kids, helping with the family unit, I was here with me. Going into my second marriage, that was one of the biggest changes in me, is maturity. I understood my actions have a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm always me, my I, then that's going to put her, my second wife, in a position to react a certain way. And I didn't want that. I already saw what that looked like.
Right.
I didn't want that. So,
how do you trust yourself to go for it again?
Because I delivered. I delivered. So I know I can deliver.
No, I mean like overall, like to go through the trials and tribulations of being married the first time. How do you trust yourself to say, I want to do this again?
Yeah, it was because Lisa was different. She was different than what I typically attracted. She matched my ambition. She matched my, we matched on so many different things, and that made me say, okay, you know what? If something happened to me, she's gonna take care of my kids. She's gonna take care of my estate. I don't worry about that at all. That gave me the courage to say, oh, this is a sound decision long term. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't feelings. Really.
Really? Okay, so is there, you know how a lot of women will say the first marriage was for love, the second one is more of an understanding of business. How does that sound to you? Because you said, everything you said sounded very logical, very structured, very strategic in a way. Like,
Well,
how does that work?
When you bring kids and family into the equation, I think it's very naive to it's naive to not factor in the value side of things. Like, what are you bringing? What am I bringing?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Women tend to, their emotions and feelings tend to override some of those core base things. And it'll color the picture a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll make a decision that you should have either held off on or read it a little different versus what we're talking about using my framework, right? Mm-hmm. I base my decisions on, of course, I love her, right? I enjoy being around her. We can coexist, right? Without, I'm not ready to go. I'm not like, you know what I mean? And then on top of that, like, I can unpack it real quick. We had alignment on financial issues. Okay. We had alignment on uh, like business opportunities. We had alignment on like, okay, these were conversations. It wasn't awkward on the first day. Like on the first date, it wasn't awkward to sit down and say, hey, you know what? What's your credit? Okay. It was like, yeah, I've been sitting on that. Like, okay, you too? Okay, cool. Well, since that's not awkward, then what you think about that? Okay, hell, I've been waiting to meet somebody that would ask me that. Shit, let's talk. It was that the energy was just like that.
So you didn't feel like, you watch these little social media skits of people going on these, like you did not have a problem with someone asking you those baseline questions of how you stacked up in terms of being a high value man per se?
No, because if I'm being even at that point, I was nowhere where I am today, of course. I was doing good, but it was more like ambition. She had ambition. Lisa had already had her real estate brokerage start, right? She had just launched a real estate brokerage, right? And then, but I was still in corporate, so I didn't have any businesses. I didn't have anything like that. But when we connected, it was like, you got ambition, I get ambition. ambition. We're not fighting for the same space. We're not fighting for the same bandwidth. We can merge and then go. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't awkward. It wasn't. It flowed.
Do you consider yourself the head of your household?
Absolutely, absolutely.
What does that look like?
I provide. I protect. I'm the priest of my home. What I mean by that is I listen. I minister to my home. I'm not just talking about religion or faith. I'm talking about the priest as in I provide guidance. I provide counsel. And that doesn't mean I always have the answers, but I've learned how to ask the right questions. Or if I don't have the right questions or the answer, I know when to sit back and just, like we was talking about earlier, I know how to sit in that pocket. Okay. And just ride it out. That doesn't mean it's not hard or frustrating sometimes, but I think that's what made me the head of my household. I provide, I protect, I'm the priest of my household, and I'm present in my household. That's what makes me the man of my house.
So having a wife that is just as ambitious as you are, did you all have that conversation ahead of time? Like, my expectation is to be the head of the household, and this is what this looks like, and this is how I plan to do that? Or is it something that just fell in line just because you both are that way?
That happened organically because I had the benefit of a failed marriage. Yeah, I knew I've experienced the opposite. So I knew in this one, case in point, the boundaries were set while we were dating. So we don't do cursing. Like we don't curse at each other. We don't yell and fuss in the bedroom. That's a sacred place for us. That doesn't mean you don't get frustrated or we don't have an exchange or whatever. Right? Mm-hmm. But if we go in there, let's get out of this room. Things like that. So those are the little things. Or I'll give you another example. Older me, I don't have to drive the conversation. I can sit back, say what I gotta say, then open up. Tell me, what do you think? And if you say, okay, I don't know what to say, then we'll sit in it for a little bit. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to resolve it right there.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think that the need to resolve things immediately, where do you think that stems from? Because some people are not wanting to give that space. There needs to be a level of resolve or an answer right then and there. Like, what do you think that
Impatience. Impatience. There's some immaturity there in not in you're not judging somebody. Mm-hmm. When I say immature, is you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. In that specific situation, is immature. It's a lack of you gotta have be able to think with a strategic cap when you're in a marriage too. Even if you're the man or woman, you gotta be able to zoom out or zoom up a couple of levels and say, okay, if I say this, if I do this, this is what it could potentially lead to. And I don't want to pay that price. It's not worth it. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, it does. I honestly believe that. I think that, and I don't necessarily know if it's just related to a marriage, but I really firmly believe that some things, once you say them, you can't take it back. No matter how much you apologize on it, that person that you said it to now looks at you completely differently. Yeah. It's a matter of, I can't trust you with this space, but no. So I totally understand that.
Yeah. And so going back to your original question about, a certain roles and head of the house and all that stuff, when you come into the relationship and you're deliberate like that, you don't have to say much. I give an example. When you go into the office or wherever your workplace, let's say you've only had minimal engagement with your boss's boss or the highest of your chain, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have to say much to you in order to assert their leadership.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? Their conversation's different. They walk different. They talk different. They greet you differently. I feel like the same thing applies at home.
So when we're talking about asserting the role, and not necessarily like raw or I'm gonna make it, but like just naturally forming into that space of I am the head of the house. How do you handle the transitions that your partner or that your family may be going through throughout their time in their life? Because I feel like people change, and you may be dealing with at least 3 different people during the course of a lifetime. So how does that factor into being the head of the household when you yourself might be going through a transition of self?
Yeah, a lot of grace. A lot of grace. I think you have to give yourself and your spouse a lot of grace. Listen, for anyone that watches this or hears it, I'm not saying I'm not perfect at all. What I'm saying is what I've done was my all my mentors, the people and individuals that's played an impactful role of who I've become as a leader. I've taken those qualities and I've kind of implemented them in my home. So when I say okay, I'll say okay, just like building a team at work, until you get everything, your processes and systems fully implemented, you got to be patient with people, right? So in the marriage, I say give grace because there may be changes going on. There could be death in the family. There can be hormones. There can be, for men and women, there can be medical issues. There can be, financial hardships. And you extend grace because, again, what's the source? We got to find the source of this. You know what I'm saying? So I try to bring in those leadership qualities that I learned from other sources and people and implement that. Okay. So you brought up a really good point, and I'm curious to get your take on it because I really feel like when people, whether it's men or women, they lose a parent or they lose a significant person, they are never the same. Right. How do you, as a man, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with loss? Because from what I know of you, you're very stoic in a lot of things. Like you don't, you're very rarely out of pocket in terms of emotions. But there are significant losses, whether it's a loss of a relationship or a loss of a person. How does that show up for you? And how does somebody know what to do with that or how to show up for you if you're that? I think, Sha, I think it's one of those deals where, let me see, how do I put this? I don't think it's intentional. Speaking for me, I don't think it's intentional. I think it's because I find it easier to listen and keep myself in frame than to have to apologize for shooting up. So that attribute that I've developed in my late 30s, that's what keeps me from, as you say, like, okay, no matter if it's losing a loved one or, dealing with, family issues, medical, you know what I mean? Things like that. Because you understand tragedy happens. We all have experienced it. We all will experience it. I mean, we all got to clock out, right? So that being said, being able to prioritize listening. But where does your release happen? Because to me, and honestly, I think that this is where a lot of men have that same mentality of I'm going to be there for everyone, and they never get that release. And then what happens is when you do release is at the most inopportune time. Yeah. And it's like, man, what am I supposed to do with this? Yeah. And it's usually not even at the person that deserves the release. Yeah. Two things. I have two releases. Mine is working out, and mine is my second release is my prayer and meditation time. I have to create. So working out for me is spiritual. So a lot of people a lot of people use church. A lot of people use rituals and ceremonies to release. For me, the gym is my release. I love going to church and I love that private, worship time with God the way I like, right? I don't need a lot of show. I don't need the entertainment of church, right? But when I can go and just release and just, if it's through tears, if it's through silence, whatever, right? That's one way for me. The gym is critical for me. The gym is critical because I can just like invert all the way, like inside, right? And say, okay, I got my music, I got the weights, and I can release that energy into the weights, into the cardio or whatever, right? The training. That's the second thing. And then the thing that what I was telling you was I have to fight for space and opportunity to pray and meditate for me. You have to fight for it? What I mean by that is because you got the hustle and bustle. You got the grind. You get up, you go to work, or if you got a business meeting, or if you're taking care of a transaction, whatever, it's always go hustle, go kids, go marriage, go. You know what I mean? It's always go. But when you get up, it could be 1 o'clock in the morning, 2, 3, whatever. It could be 11 o'clock at night. Whatever opportunity it is for you to get, it's in the bedroom, if it's in the closet, if it's wherever, like in the shower, whatever. You find that silent moment to just pray. and meditate, and you check on yourself. Where am I at? How I feel about this? You know what I mean? You know, if it's a time to cry, if it's a time to say, okay, you know, Father, you know, for whatever your religious beliefs are, you know, I pray to God and I ask God for His presence. I ask for His, you know, to speak to me through a dream, through somebody else, and then confirm it. You know, whatever it is, right? Guide me. And if I don't hear, I'll sit still. Gotcha. So, yeah. So when you feel about in all of these spaces that you've been in, what do you feel about mental health? And how do you feel like you've fared mentally in a lot of these spaces? Do you think that there were times where you weren't as healthy as you maybe have thought you were, but later on you're like, man, I was really not in a good space, but didn't know what to do with that energy or how to seek it? Like, where were you? Have you ever had that feeling? I've had that feeling. I've had that. Yeah, I've had that. The one thing that when it comes to mental health, I acknowledge. I acknowledge it because it's a real thing, and the brain is an organ, it's a muscle, it needs attention, right? So I acknowledge that. For me specifically, the biggest hurdle for me is trust. It's hard for me to trust people to sit down on the couch and say, you know, someone with a notepad, you know, and a outline to check the boxes, right? Right. You know, I think it's necessary. There are times where I'll give you a quick story. There are times where I was not okay, and I knew it. But credit to Lisa, she did. She took care of me. So I'll tell a quick story. I'll tell a quick story. So back in 2016, we launched our investment business with real estate, buying and flipping houses, and did it at a high rate. 2018, we made some transactions that was supposed to net enough income to bring me out of corporate altogether. Those transactions didn't go as planned. The market changed, and I ended up losing money. Well, I'm sure somebody's listening and saying, okay, well, how did that negatively impact you? Well, because Lisa gave me warning on certain parts of those transactions that I didn't listen to. And had I listened to them, we would have fared differently. But she trusted me. So I felt like I failed my family. I felt mentally that I failed the business. And that became a big mental hurdle. And for years, like for like 2 years, I felt like a failure. We sold those houses and we made a lot of money on it, but it didn't hit the mark. Right. So I ended up having to still work. So anyway, she took care of me. She sent me to Miami. Yeah, right. Yeah, and I went to the one of Tony Robbins uh, conventions. It was undescribable. Like to go in there and shed and admit I failed. So what? I need to fail. You feel me? Like that's where because I remember we were talking, we were in the restroom talking, and I just broke down. Like broke down. Like I fell to my knees and I was like, how did this happen? You know what I'm saying? You see your capital here, money's here, and then all of a sudden like two decisions, and we here instead of we was here. You know what I'm saying? And it is because of me. That impacted me. Yeah. So it's happened. Yeah. And so, do you feel like once you hit that space, once you come out of it, are you able to fully let it go? Or is that something that is constantly the elephant in the room for you? Nah. You know what? I let it go because I say this especially for Black people. As kids, we don't get coached or encouraged to fail. It's perfection. You gotta be better. And I get it. And I understand why. But so to answer your question, um, I've learned to let it go. 2018 had to happen for 2025, right? 2018 had to happen for 2021. 2018 had to happen so that I can understand that you got deeper issues with, and now what the root of that is, I'm a perfectionist. And perfection is absolutely one of the worst attributes that anyone can have. You know what I'm saying? But why do you need to be a perfectionist?
Where did that stem from?
How you were raised. My dad was very disciplined. My dad was very like you know what I mean. Like
nothing out of place.
yeah, this got to be lined up, and it made me like that, right? And I appreciate it, but it made me, it ingrained something in me that I have to, everything has to be, the I's have to be dotted and T's have to be crossed, everything. And it made me so that it made me afraid to fail. And when you are afraid to fail, you don't reach your.
I'm about to say, how do you learn
You
when
can't.
you're afraid to fail? You stay in the safe space.
Right. To this day, that now when you ask me, is that something you have to constantly be mindful of? Absolutely. That is something that I always have to be mindful of. Courtney, don't be afraid to fail. Courtney, don't be a perfectionist. Build it on the fly. Build it. Like we're gonna build this on the fly.
Even in things that you just started learning how to do, you feel like you need to be a perfectionist at it? Or do you give yourself the grace to say?
I do. Yeah, I do give myself grace for that. But if it's something that I feel like I'm good at, or if it's something that I feel like it's a talent of mine, or something that comes natural, I'm like, I need to kill that. I got to perform.
That's dangerous.
Very, very. And that's to your point, though. I'm mindful of that. Mm. And I get ahead of it. And now it's like, okay, in my practice, my meditation, my work on myself is court. It's okay to fall short. Get it tomorrow. Or it's okay that you made the wrong decision. Mm-hmm. But do you understand why
you made it? Yeah.
Bingo.
So I feel like I can ask you this question, and because I'd like to hear your perspective on it. Of all the things that you've been through, lived through, the lives that you've lived, if you had the opportunity right now to have the life, the utopian life that Courtney has been seeking, but you could do it without your ego, would you still choose to keep your ego or forego it to have the life that you've been seeking?
I'll let it go.
You let your ego go?
I'll let it go.
Tell me about it.
I let the ego go because maybe I'm just being too practical. I don't know. If I had to choose the life that I've always wanted, or versus having peace, or not peace, but having a part of me that the little voice in the back of my head that say you this, you that, you all that, you this and that. I'd rather let the ego go and what I perceive that I've been good at, and say, okay, if I can have everything that I envision, I'd rather have that because that's like I said. Remember, as a kid, I've always wanted more. I wanted more information. I wanted more. I wanted a different type of lifestyle. And if I can have that as a kid, and that's always rooted in me, I'm going with that.
Okay. So now I would like to take that and dive a little bit deeper with that. So you just really just said, I've always wanted more.
Yeah.
So in that, part of that is your ego. Like, I want to seek more. There is more to it. So in that being part of who you are and that drive and that hunger to seek more, to learn more, to achieve more, you would forego that? You would have a magic wand and take that part of you away just for the comforts of having everything that you want?
I think so. I think so. Yeah. Because okay, for me, I'm gonna speak for me. Mm-hmm. I am not motivated by money. I enjoy what money can do, and it empowers me to do what I want to do. But I don't. So if I have to leave that behind, if that's attached to my ego, I can let that go. But if I find peace and I find, if the climate is where just use it as a term, if the climate is what I want in that utopia, then yeah, I'm gonna go there.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. There were women that I met, talked to, kind of vetted out before I met Lisa, right? Mm-hmm. Lisa stood out because there was peace. It wasn't, there were ladies that had, the affection and all the, all that, the physical stuff, and you know what I mean, all those little things. With Lisa, it was peace. You know what I'm saying? That peace aligned with the that open conversation, and I went with the peace. You know what I mean?
Because that would be more lasting to you and more impactful to you versus the other.
Yeah, because you think about it. We've known each other for a long time. A long time. Look at how much I've changed. From the dorms to my first marriage and all of my antics and different things that we've all seen each other evolve. I place more weight on what's down the road. We're not physically the same anymore, right? We have things change. So what's the long play? What's the long play? Who's gonna be there when I need my dialysis? Or who's gonna be there when I need my diabetes administered? You know what I mean? Like those are the type. Those are kind of things. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 So we are at the end of our interview, and I thank you greatly for this. If you were to have this stick for the day and were able to allow this project to take flight and do more, what would you want to see come of it? And how do you feel like women and family, society can do more to support men? What would you look for? What would you ask for? Build your man up. Okay. Nurture your man. What I mean by that is, remember when you saying like, okay, how do you check on yourself? Like, when do you release, right? Mm-hmm. Build them up, because something as simple as I'm so proud of you. You're doing a great job. Or just saying thank you. Thank you for whatever little things that he does do. Every man is not handy. Every man is not good with finances. Every man is not good with, affection. Every man is not like, you know what I mean? So the things that he does do, thank you for talking to me at night. Thank you for laying with me. Thank you for helping me with my parents. Like, that can change a man's life. That can make a man's day. That can make a man's year. As subtle as that, I would say. So if you're asking me with your platform and in your circles and other people that consume it, I would say tell your spouse, tell them thank you. Life is short. We are in the present, and I think like we talk about gratitude. Gratitude shifts your whole the way you move, right? Gratitude makes you make better decisions. So I think if you're operating out of gratitude, and you tell your man, since we're talking about men, you tell if you're in a space of gratitude, you're not looking at what he's not doing. You're looking at what he is doing. You're not looking at his current physique. You're looking at what he could be, or you're looking at what you're grateful for what he is, right? And you can say, okay, thank you. Thank you for cooking. Thank you. And that thank you will, when he goes out and deal with the world, he'll say, I'm not going to quit because she believes in me. The kids believe in me. They need me. Like, you know what I mean? That small gesture can move mountains. So do you think that gratitude and showing, appreciation and presence of mind of knowing what a person does, do you think that should start with young men earlier? I think so. Yeah, I think it starts with kids. Everything, the earlier you start, the better. The earlier you start these habits and you ingrain them, the better. Because, like we said, look at the impact of my childhood on me, right? The impact of that, so overly ambitious, so overly hungry for more and all this and that. My 20s blew by like this because I was always like forward, forward, forward instead of present, present, present. I missed it. And when you build these habits in kids and young men and young women when they're young, you teach them, hey, your journey is going to be perfectly aligned where it's going to be. Just take your time and walk in. Give yourself some grace. Don't be afraid to fail, right? Try it. Do what you got to do. Fail. I don't care. Just don't hurt nobody in the process, right? Okay, yeah. Right? And don't do too much damage to yourself in the process, and live, right? Because then if you do that, you're not going to go have a family at 19, 20, 21 and have kids at a young age that where you're not able to be, continue to develop yourself, because I can't do that, and you know what I mean? And so anyway, yeah, I think the younger you start, the better, because you don't create those stigmas in kids. You empower them. Gotcha. They're not afraid to be kids. If I'm honest, we didn't get to be kids. No, not at all. Sad. Well, thank you so much. Yes, ma'am. It's been a pleasure. Yes, ma'am. It's been a pleasure. Great conversation.